Couldn't find my little friend, so I looked in the attic, I looked in the basement, I looked in the kitchen, I looked